everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be taking a trip west to Baldwin and the very busy CSX yard that they have there in that small town. We're also going to be chasing a very honorable locomotive today, and one that's going to make for a fitting end to this summer. It's 6:15 a.m. and I'm heading westbound on State Road 202, which will take me to I-95, which after passing through the heart of downtown Jacksonville will lead to Interstate 10 and my route to Baldwin and the S-Line. As long as you're careful not to hit these junctions and intersections at peak rush hour, these roads are actually fairly quick, and about 30 minutes after setting out this morning, I'd be pulling into Baldwin, where my first and main objective for the day would be sitting. As we'll soon explore, Baldwin's largest road crossing in town is just north of a control point named Baldwin Tower, where the SP line from the west crosses the S line just a few hundred yards north of where the north end of the massive Baldwin Yard resides. Currently blocking that interlocking and parked just short of the crossing is train M452. You can see why I was interested in finding this train, as the previous day it had made an afternoon run up the S-Line, drawing the attention of dozens of Central Florida rail fans. But hearing the train never got into the yard the previous evening, I knew there was a shot that this train would actually hold here overnight, and here at 6:45 a.m. on this dreary gray morning, there would be M452-23 with its advertised power. Although the outbound crew would go on duty about 3 hours prior to me getting here at 03:30, there still would be a couple moves that would have to be done before 452 could take off to Waycross.
Number 18 crossover, normal. Line, I'm clear up riding. We need at least 15 to the bump. Line clear 15.
At 7 a.m. the moves would begin, as 452's conductor, now deep in the yard, would call to his engineer, telling him to pull his last string of freight out from one of the dozens of staging tracks before backing onto his final cut and dropping the rest of his empty auto racks from Palm Center. As packed as our roads here already are, and as maligned as the growth we see in our state every day is, the auto and housing industry has breathed life back into Old Baldwin Yard about a decade ago, when service came back and the facilities here were rebirthed. For a while, Baldwin sat empty, its many tracks used for storage, and yard office and tower simply a landmark that crews would pass at speed as they bypassed the yard. However, with the advent of the 2013 S-Line expansion and the numerous upgrades that arrived in the following months, Baldwin returned to its former glory, if you will, a now busy 24/7 operating yard that quickly becomes a bottleneck for freight traffic in and out of Florida. Case in point, M456 around the corner at East Baldwin. Arriving here pre-dawn after a midnight departure out of Orlando, M456 would have to wait here on this M452 to depart before the Baldwin Yardmaster would allow them to enter. A move that requires this 456 to pull onto the S-Line using the Northeast connection track before backing their whole train into the yard. Today's 456 would be a coveted catch, as an SD70 Mace would lead CSX's chassis system heritage unit, and while I would have absolutely stayed to see the train move itself into the yard, I'd hear that 452 was getting his job briefing with the dispatcher as the conductor would attach the end of train device, a move called hanging the light to most railroaders.
Yeah, so how many more moves you got to make? You got one more track to pick up, or are you about to hang your EOC now? Hanging the light. I'll tell you what, that's right on time. All right, thank you.
I'd leave with time to spare, as 452's conductor would be driven up to the US 90 crossing that we were originally at. With the sun being hidden under a thick sheet of clouds this morning, I wouldn't have to worry about any particular sun angles this day, but I'd still settle initially at Briceville, where a wide open shot can be found as trains out of Baldwin reach track speed. On the sleepy Sunday morning before church, Briceville would be as quiet as anywhere, as 452's Thunder approaches from the south, clearing the small community at 8 a.m. sharp.
Engine 911. Got a clear, Briceville. Track one going up.
From Briceville, I'd hit US 301 once again to make it to Crawford, where I'd make sure I'd have plenty of time to set up for my shot and plan my photo framing. As nice as it would have been for the sun to appear here, I'd take the shade of the many clouds overhead, making for a cool and breezy August morning, one that's almost unheard of during this humid and broiling late summer season.
223 to 911 got clear. Cross track 1 north out.
Four miles north of Crawford is Callahan, where the Nahunta sub from Jessup, Folkestone, and Hilliard meets the Callahan sub from Baldwin and the route for our M452 this morning. Callahan was once the location of an at-grade interlocking between the ACL's Nahunta sub and the Seaboard's Callahan sub, which used to continue to Fernandina Beach on the original 1857-built Florida Railroad trackage. That line would be ripped out in the 1970s, and the Seaboard and ACL's trackage would end up joining here at the junction we see today, where 452 will bend onto the A-line towards Folkestone, the same A-line that will take Amtrak 97 to Tampa, hence the green signal on the left. As many of you probably remember from the countless times I've caught this train farther south on the S-Line, this M452 comes out of Miami in the middle of the night, working Okeechobee on his way north before getting recrewed at Lakeland and working Wildwood on his way to Baldwin. From there, a third crew will come aboard, drop the Autorex, pick up and drop off miscellaneous freight, and finally take off for Waycross, where the 2-day journey terminates at the giant Thomas Rice Yard. Hearing action closer to Baldwin this morning, I'd say farewell to Callahan after grabbing some coffee at a local cafe and meander back on 301 southbound. Settled in 1846 with the initial name of Thigpen, the town of Baldwin has been a slow-paced hamlet ever since the railroad brought life to this pine forest 20 miles west of Jacksonville. Captured by federal forces during its days in the Civil War, Baldwin was described by troops as desolate and poor, with barely any attractions or even connections to the outside world. Formally reincorporated under Florida's municipal charter in May of 1913, Baldwin would see a shift in commerce and trade as the railroad would begin serving the town. Seaboard's Wildwood sub from the south would cross their Tallahassee sub at the diamond that we still see today, and ACL's Jacksonville to Newberry main line, formerly the Jacksonville and Southwestern Railroad's 1899 construction. Nowadays, the railroad presence in Baldwin is still the driving factor of commerce, as the town hosts 11 churches and 4 major roadways between I-10, US 90, and US 301 and its bypass. The old ACL main line now is a biking trail that offers bikers 22 miles of straight paved roadway along the old ACL route, from the trailhead here at Baldwin's Jerry M. Carroll Memorial Park to Jacksonville's terminus, adjacent to Jack's Ramp and the current Duval Yard. Five miles south of Baldwin at milepost S660 is Maxville, where at one point this village grew around the same steel rails we're looking at today, now just another community made up of a couple hundred persons and an AEI detector on the railroad. Maxville once hosted a pair of Seaboard signals, acting almost as the distant to Baldwin signals, but they were moved much further south towards Highland over a decade ago. I'd make it to Maxville with reports of an M442 coming out of Tampa, making its way through Lottie, which would put it here in just a few minutes, as I'd wait him out patiently on the empty Normandy Boulevard overpass just west of downtown. One of the aspects that excites me of living up here in North Florida now is the concept of seeing a bunch of trains in daylight that normally down home run at some of the most ungodly hours of the night. Exhibit A, this M442. Leaving Tampa behind this morning around 4 a.m., he'd make it up here just before 0930 with plenty of freight from my favorite city and autoracks from Drew Park bringing up the rear as usual. Just 6 miles south of Maxville is the first set of crossovers and control points south of Baldwin on this original Seaboard double track at Highland. I'd come down here as it's a newer spot for me, and I'd hear that M442 from Maxville meeting his counterpart train, M441, at the south end of Baldwin Yard, as 441 would depart and 442 would arrive. The radio would good news me even more, as the dispatcher would reach out to M441, telling the fresh crew that they'd be meeting 2 northbounds before the end of the double track at Noonan, just south of Stark, hence 441's slower speed compared to the usual 60-mile-per-hour freight limit. M441 is pretty much the exact same train as 442, except instead of taking empties back north, 441 is all loaded save for a string of scrap metal cars and cement hoppers that will likely end up somewhere on the Tampa terminal sub around Rockport, Orlando Lakes at Pasco Iron and Metal, and Cemex in Brooksville. I knew I wouldn't have too much time before more trains showed up soon, so I'd relocate just a couple of miles south at Lottie, where the town's sand mine resides, served by this spur track branching from track 2 on the north side of town. We're now 14 miles south of Baldwin at milepost S670.8, where a pair of ABS signals would light up green for a northbound on track 1, after meeting that M441 just minutes prior. It's EO41, empty coal from Orlando Stanton Energy Center and returning to Evansville, Indiana for another load, led by a couple of CSX's rebuilt CM44s.
3 locomotive CSX T7411 of the clear, loaded mine, north on 1, out.
EO41 would be a nice catch this day, with their 97 empties behind 2 head-end motors at track speed. They'd be rolling here, as just 6 minutes behind them and meeting that M441 just south of town would be another northbound. This one calling is B828 out of Tampa. Ethanol empties from the port of Tampa to Proviso, Illinois, and the interchange to Union Pacific. I'm glad I got the EO41 and B828 here, south of Baldwin, as once they would reach the yard, they'd make plans to actually combine the 2 trains into one huge EO40, led by those 2 CM44s, as B828's power would soon become the mid-train DPUs. Nestled comfortably on the northern side of Bradford County and 50 miles from downtown Jacksonville is Lottie. With a population of 636 denizens at the 2020 census, Lottie used to be known for its terrible speed trap, where crooked police forces would track down on any poor soul that found himself just 2 or 3 miles per hour over the posted 45 zone, which suddenly appears after miles of open roads at 65. However, in 2018, Police Chief Shane Bennett would change all of that, cutting the number of officers in half for the small town and reforming the force, making Lottie a much more inviting and less stressful place to explore or drive through for that matter. I take a few minutes after the B828 to take some shots from the town center, where police cars new and old would be resting this Sunday morning next to the old Seaboard Depot, remodeled by the local civic club many years ago, now sitting next to City Hall and the Veterans Memorial. Here in Lottie, I'd wrap up my morning as I'd head back to Jack's for church and some barbecue lunch. I can't wait to continue exploring these new places and catch more of what this busy area has to offer. But for now, on the S-Line in Lottie, I'll see you all trackside soon. This is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.